Hi everyone, it's Katie, and today I have a fun tarot video for you. I have kind of recently had quite a big clean out, or over the last few months had a bit of a clean out of decks that I just don't use. The decks that I haven't used in ages and I just feel like it's time to move them on. But then I have those decks in my collection that I either use very, very rarely or have never used, but that I don't feel ready to let go of. And I wanted to share those decks with you and explore a little bit about why that is, why I don't use them and why I still hold on to them. So the first one is a pretty easy one. I can't say this. Auricle de Mira. I feel like if I tried to say it with a more French accent, I'd just offend somebody. But this deck, I think I've used it like once or twice, and that's only with my mum. Now, when my mum goes away on holidays, she always comes back, or almost always comes back with a deck for me. And she and my dad went to Paris, to France, for their wedding anniversary 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Anyway, she brought this deck back for me, and I love it. I especially love the backing. I think it's so pretty. But I don't use this deck. I mean, obviously the reason I'm not giving this deck away is because my mum bought it for me, and I do love it. I think it's really cute, very pretty. But I've never had any desire to read with it. And I'm not sure entirely why. I mean, it's not because it's in French, because for the most part you can work out what they say. Because, you know, a lot of them have, you know, words or spellings that is quite close to English. Worst case scenario, you can Google it. So it's not that I don't understand the cards or that the images aren't clear enough. I don't know. I just don't have any desire to read with it. I adore the backing, and I do quite like the cards. I think it's very cute, and the colours are very pretty. Oh, I like this one too. The weathers, the seasons, I should say. So I don't know what it is. I mean, I love it, and I don't want to let it go because my mum bought it for me when she was in France. But I also have absolutely no desire or need to work with it. So that is the first one that's in my collection, even though I don't use it and I don't particularly want to. The next one is a deck that I've had for a very long time, and I wanted it for a very long time. It's the Marrya Tower. This is out of print, but it's one that you can get fairly cheaply. I think I paid $20 for mine. I mean, the box is a bit beat up, but whatever. It comes with this like little fold out, like kind of like a little white book, but not quite. It's just like 2 cards joined together, and it's just got a few keywords for each of the cards. The backing's really cool. And I love the images. It has a bunch of keywords and like her own, Mary Poole is her name, I think. Yeah, her own like numerology associations, which apparently are explained in a guidebook, but that's super rare. Like, I don't think there was many of those published. But I love this artwork. I really, really do like it. And it's quite diverse as well, which I think is really cool. The colours are really pretty. It's certainly my style. And yet I've never really worked with it. I think I've done like 1 or 2 readings, but I've had this deck for like 3 or 4 years. And having said that, whenever I'm kind of planning on doing a bit of a clear out, I will, you know, pull out my decks and have a bit of a look at them. And I'll kind of see the Marrya on my shelf. And I'll be like, haven't used you, it's about time you went. And then I pull it open and look through it, and I'm like, oh, I love it. Why don't I use you? I don't know. This is one of, I think, the most perplexing out of all of the decks that I have to show you. That everything about it says I should love it, and yet I don't use it. The next is an Oracle deck, and I think it is out of print, but I don't imagine many of you will be interested in it, to be honest. And I got it in that big haul I had at the beginning of last year when I met an older lady here in Melbourne who just wanted to get rid of most of her collection. And I got this Oracle deck and book, The Wisdom of the Australian Animals Oracle. Now, I don't know, I mean, The backing's quite cute. The artwork isn't like amazing and the cardstock's a bit flimsy. Like, part of me thinks I should just move this deck on because I don't really use it. I don't particularly love the artwork, but then something about it says that it has a place for me. Maybe not now, but in the future. And I think that has something to do with better connecting with the earth here in Australia, the seasons and the animals that are native. I think that's where I'm coming at, you know, with not wanting to get rid of it. So I'm really not sure exactly what it is, but I have no particular desire just to read with it. And yet I'm not willing to part with it either. I really like that actually. Here's a koala. It's cute. I don't know. I still, like, even now looking at it, I don't feel any particular strong attraction or draw to it or connection with it. But I also have no desire to keep it out and put it on Facebook ready to sell or swap. Now the next two are by the same artist. They're Brian Froud's Fairies Auricle, the Fairies Auricle and the Heart of Fairy. I have the book and the deck for the Fairies Auricle, and I have the box set for the Heart of Fairy. I worked a little bit with this deck, trying to connect with it. I worked through the introduction in the book that kind of goes through picking the cards that you're attracted to or that you find appealing and kind of thinking about why that is, and then going through and picking the cards that you don't like and that sort of stuff. I enjoyed that process, but I think with this deck I find the bottoms hard to read, and then with both of them I think I'm a little bit intimidated. So I'm not exactly sure what it is with these decks. I think they feel a little bit insurmountable or a little bit unapproachable. And so therefore I've just kept my distance. Like, they're not begging me to use them because I think you need to come to them. And I just haven't made that step, that commitment to do so yet. The next deck is the Tarot of a Moon Garden. Now I have used this once or twice, but it's not one that I go to, but I adore it. And if you've watched me for any length of time, you might know that this was my very, very first ever deck. I picked it up in a store when I was like 14, and I was like obsessed with it for a year or two. And then, I don't know, just, you know, as you grow up, you lose things or forget about things or lose interest in things. And I don't know what happened to this deck, but then with that big haul that I had at the beginning of last year, the lady that I got the decks off had this deck, and I was so excited and very happy to be reunited with it. I don't read with it, and I think the main reason above all else is that the printing is not great, the printing quality. It's ever so slightly fuzzy, and I don't know whether it's just because I don't have the best eyes to begin with. It kind of makes me a little bit dizzy, a little bit, I don't know. I just find it difficult to look at these cards too much for too long. Which means that it just kind of stays in its box. I think I've done 1 or 2 readings for someone else with it. I've done 1 or 2 readings for myself, but I mean, again, I've had this for 2 years or so. So you would expect me to have used it a lot more. But because it was my very first ever deck, and it just brings back all those wonderful memories of exploring tarot for the very first time and the mystery of it, and also just how pretty this deck is, I have no desire to let it go. I'm so happy for it to be in my life. The next deck is another one that I got in that haul. Got a bit of a theme running through here, and it's the Sacred Rose Tarot. Now, I feel almost certain that I will love this deck, and I've had that feeling ever since I first got it. And that is the key reason it's still in my collection. But I haven't used it. I haven't even shuffled it, which you will see because it's still all in order. But I feel sure, like 99% sure, that I would love to work with this deck and that I will connect with this deck. I love the colors. I love the characters. I love that they're a little bit alien, with those just white eyes. I really, really like it. And I think, I'm trying to think why I haven't used this deck. I think in part it might be because I got so many decks at the same time that this one just kind of got put, you know, on the back burner. But also what I think it might be is that I actually have the larger companion guide. And as you can see, it's a pretty decent sized book. I've always been one of those people who wants to have the book, just because I love reading and I love learning, and I feel like, I don't know, to get the most out of a deck, I probably should have the book, right? But often what I find is that having the book is somewhat of a barrier to me than just getting into the deck, just getting into it and using it. It's almost as though, I guess with the Fairies Oracle, it's similar. It's that I feel intimidated, that I feel like I need to read the book and I need to know everything about it and I need to have mastered it and understand the book and all of that before I can work with the deck. So even as much as I love having the books and I really enjoy reading and I love learning about the decks through, you know, the author or the artist's own words and understanding their intention, I think often it's actually more of a barrier than it is an aid. And I think that has a lot to do with my own, you know, perfectionist tendencies and confidence a lot of the time. But that is an interesting thing that I've kind of only recognized more recently. But yeah, I don't want to get rid of this deck yet, but I don't know what's going on. Maybe I should just screw the book and get into them, just shuffle the cards and use them. Now, I wasn't sure whether to include this deck because I haven't had it for the longest time, but I think it is coming on to like 6 or 7 months now. So, you know, that time is starting to add up and I don't think I've done a reading with it yet. I've shuffled it and looked at it and played with it, but I haven't done a reading. It's the Incidental Tarot. Now, I ordered this along with the Curious Oracle, and I played around with that, but I'm pretty sure that's not a deck for me. That is on my trade list. Whereas this deck was on my wish list for the longest time, like well before the Curious Oracle even existed. That's the backing. This was a deck that was on my wish list that I wanted, that I loved, but that the shipping was just as much as the deck was, so I wasn't willing to do it. I love this artwork, I love the colors, I love the changes that they've made, but for some reason it's been sitting on my shelf and I haven't used it. And I think, again, I'm just recognizing, you know, saying this out loud, I'm having as many realizations, or many more realizations than I think I've had, you know, sitting with these questions on my own. I think I've been a little bit intimidated to approach it, just because there are so many changes. So I think this is another one that I just need to get into. I think a common thread here is that a lot of these decks, not all of them, but a lot of them I'm just overthinking. I'm overthinking my relationship with them. I'm overthinking how I should approach them. But I mean, I've said before, the Gill Tarot is my favorite tarot. A lot of my favorite decks, I love semi-pictorial pips. I love semi-illustrated pips. So not Marseille style, but decks that, you know, use the pips in creative ways. Another deck I think definitely falls into a similar category as the Fairies Oracles, Tarot of the She. Now this is a deck that people rave about. I remember at the end of last year, people were doing kind of like their roundup of their top 5 decks of 2016, and so many people had this as their number 1 or number 2 or number 3 deck. Like, it was massive for a lot of people, and I've had it, I don't know, since about March, and I think I've pulled it out and looked at it 2 or 3 times, and that's the extent of my work with this deck. I'm a little bit comfortable with the decks that I use a lot and that I love to read with. And so if I get a new deck and I don't click with it immediately, it's very easy just to put it back on the shelf and say, oh, I'll come back to you later. And then I don't. I'm not sure. This is kind of a deck that I'm contemplating the idea of maybe I'm not meant to work with it. Maybe I'm not meant to connect with it. It borders on making me feel uncomfortable, uneasy. And I'm not sure whether that's an indication that I need to work with it, that there's something there that I need to kind of connect with and explore, or if it's an indication that we're not meant to work together and that, you know, it's just not right, and that's okay. So I'm still considering what to do with this deck. I think out of all of them, it's the one that I'm closest to just deciding, nope, it's fine, move to a new home, find someone who loves you. I'm not that person. Time will tell. But I know a lot of people adore this deck, so if you love this deck now but had trouble connecting to it in the beginning, I would love to hear your thoughts on how I might approach this deck. Now the next one is another one I wasn't quite sure whether I was going to include, but I'm going to. It's the Marrya Tower. Now, in theory, this is one of my favorite decks. It's absolutely beautiful. I have trimmed mine. I adore the imagery. I love the readings. I do. I love the pips. It's kind of self-inspired, although I kind of read more Rider-Waite-Smithy and intuitively, because I don't know the Thoth system. And so because it sits on my shelf, and I don't like having decks for the sake of having them. I mean, obviously this whole video is the exception to the rule, but for the most part, if a deck, I don't use it, I don't keep it. And this is one of those decks where I'm like, is it time for us to just part ways? I don't know. I feel as though this deck is kind of, it's in charge of when we work together, and it doesn't like to be bothered with the smaller readings. It wants the hard stuff, the heavy stuff, the big picture stuff. And so because of that, I don't get to just use it all the time for something little, you know, kind of those more fun, casual readings where I'm like, oh, what energies am I going to have today or whatever. Because I don't get to do that, I don't build that, you know, regular kind of familiarity connection with the deck. And so therefore, often I feel like I don't use it enough, or I don't have a strong enough connection to it. But I do want to have that connection to it. And the next one is the Oracle of the Dreamtime. Now, this is a deck that I wanted for quite a while. It is out of print. If you do want it, keep your eye out, because it's not one that you have to pay a lot for. It doesn't come up all the time, but it's also not particularly, you know, in high demand. But I haven't used it, not once. I love it. I think it's beautiful. And I think, on repeat, I think this is one that I feel a little bit intimidated by, because this is a sizable book. There is a lot in here. And I mean, I already put quite a lot of pressure on myself, and I think it's necessary that I do, to be very mindful and respectful and conscious when I'm engaging in anything to do with Aboriginal history, culture and spirituality. And so I do feel like I need to process a lot of this book in a very mindful way in order to approach this deck in a respectful way, if that makes sense. But because there's so much in here, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I feel a little bit intimidated, and it's one of those things that I'm like, I'll get to you when I get to you. Actually, now pulling it out, I'm feeling more than anything else, any of the other decks, that I want to keep this one out. So perhaps now is that time. I'm not sure. We will see. So I don't know about you guys, but I found this very interesting. I think it was a very productive exercise for me to kind of go through the decks that are still with me, still on my shelves, that I don't really want to let go, but I also don't work with, whether at all or enough. So I think this has been quite helpful for me to kind of consider why that is. And I think I need to ease up on my perfectionism and the pressure I put on myself to approach a deck in the right way. And then also, I just need to be okay with the fact that there are some decks that, you know, like the Tower of the Moon Garden and the Oracle deck, that I'm okay with just having in my collection because they have sentimental value. The Oracle deck my mum bought for me, Tower of the Moon Garden, was my first deck ever. A couple of other decks I kind of need to think a bit more about, like Tower of the She. But this has been overall quite a productive exercise. So thank you for indulging me. I hope it was somewhat interesting to you as well. If you have worked with or connected with any of these decks and you have some thoughts that, you know, might be productive or helpful for me, I'd love to hear them. Leave comments below. Any other questions or comments, feel free to leave those below too. And I will talk to you all again very soon. So much love, guys. Bye.